In this video, I'll be showing you how to turn an oversized denim jacket into an off-the-shoulder corset top with buckles in the front, inspired by this picture here. And special shout out to my subscribers who voted for this top as the most requested tutorial. Let's get into it. Shania, Shania. Would you believe that I thrifted this jacket for only $15? And when I tell you this jacket is good quality, it is good quality. Anyways, let me try it on. So this is the jacket on, and I actually like it. So my plan of attack is to open up the jacket, and I'm specifically cutting down the side seams as well as the seams underneath the sleeves. And I'm trying not to cut too much fabric because the more cutting I do, the less real estate I have later on when it comes time to transfer my pattern pieces. So I'm taking it easy. I'm going light. These are the pattern pieces that I'm left with. So we have the hood pieces, the sleeve pieces, we have the back panel, we have the front panel, and then this is the zipper part that was in the front, and then this is the part that was connected to the bottom of the hood. When it comes to drafting the pattern for this top, there are several different approaches that you can take to make the pattern, but I'll give you 3 different ideas. So one idea is by using a full torso block. And if you need a torso block, I have free torso blocks on my website. The link is in the description box, so go ahead and download it for free. The second way is by watching my tutorial on how to make this top. You literally would follow the same steps for drafting the pattern, but the only difference is that instead of making it a cropped length, you would just lengthen the lines along the side panels and the center panels for the front pieces as well as the back pieces, just so that you have a longer fitting top. And then the third way is by draping. When you drape, you could either drape on a dress form or you can drape on your own body, which is what I did. So I took some Saran wrap and I wrapped my body with Saran wrap, and then I wrapped some masking tape on top of the Saran wrap. I took a marker and I literally just drew out the pieces of the pattern onto my body on top of the tape. After that, I cut out the pattern pieces and I just kind of laid them flat on the table. And then I took a picture of them and I imported the picture of the pattern pieces into Inkscape. And I basically trued the pattern. These are the pattern pieces that I'm going to be using. As you can see, I have my 2 cups, I have my side pieces, my center panel, my center back panel, and then my left and right panels for the side back. And then these rectangles here are for the belt, the anchor, and then the belt loops. And then I have this larger rectangle for the shoulder piece. So the next thing I did was I took my pattern pieces and I projected it using my sewing pattern projector and the pattern projector app. How many times did I just say pattern projector? But no, really. And so I started by calibrating my mat to just make sure that like all the grid lines for the mat were lining up with the pattern projector app. And once that was all set, then I started ironing the denim fabric pieces just to make sure that once I start cutting out the fabric pieces, that it's an accurate cut. I took my denim fabric panels and I just started placing them on the mat to just kind of understand like what parts of the fabric I could use to cut what pattern pieces. And I really was just trying to make the most of that fabric. And I'm not gonna lie, there came a moment where I was like, oh crap, I might not have enough fabric, but it all worked out. I'm just working with all the smaller pattern pieces first and the smaller pieces of fabric first so that I can salvage the bigger fabric pieces for the bigger pattern pieces. And then from there, I just cut out the pattern pieces. I took my time, got my iPad and just turned on Next in Fashion and just had it playing in the background to keep me company while I was working. And these were the pattern pieces that I was left with. So the first set of pattern pieces that I chose to work with was the pieces for the shoulder part. And I actually had to divide them into 3 pieces because I didn't have a single strip of fabric long enough for the whole rectangle on its own. So once I divided it into 3 pieces, I was able to connect it into one long piece by sandwiching the two outer rectangles on top of the center rectangle with right sides facing, and then I pinned along the edges, and then I did a straight stitch about 1/4 of an inch, and that was my seam allowance for pretty much all of the pattern pieces. And this is how it turned out after I stitched the 3 pieces together to form one long rectangle. And so then from there, I decided to take it to my serger to basically seal off the perimeter of the rectangle. But truthfully, if I was thinking at the time, I should have serged every like individual pattern piece so that I could prevent fraying. But you live and you learn, and hindsight is always 20/20, right? So this is what the serged rectangle looked like. And I then decided to hem all edges of the rectangle along the seam allowance. And then I took this like pretty cool yellow thread and I decided to do a top stitch along the 2 side edges and along one edge of the rectangle, and it looked like this. All right, so now let's work on the back pieces. So I took the left and the right pieces and I stacked them on top of the middle piece with right sides facing, and also making sure that the notches were aligned. And then I pinned down the sides, and then I did a straight stitch along the seam allowance line, and it looked like this. After that, I serged all around the edges. Then after that, I did a top stitch along those seam lines on the back panel. And I think the distance is probably like 3/8 of an inch on each side of the seam. I set that aside, and now it's time to move on to the front panel. So I took my right front piece and I sandwiched it on top of the center front panel, making sure that the edges lined up. And then I pinned it down into place, and I did the same thing with the left front panel piece, sandwiched it on top of the center front panel piece, making sure that the edges lined up. I pinned it down, and then I did a straight stitch along the seam allowance line, and it looked something like this. Now, let me tell you, something weird happened with this fabric. Like, in this clip, I noticed that the center panel, the blue, looks a little different. So I'm assuming where I cut it on the jacket might have been, I don't know, I can't explain it. But in some lights, it looks completely fine. So anyways, I took it to the serger, and it looks something like this. I made sure to serge all around it, even where the cups will be as well. And speaking of cups, now it's time to move on to the cups. Okay, for the cups, I took each set of cups and I stacked them right sides facing, and then I pinned down the edge, and then I did a stitch 1/4 of an inch basically on the seam allowance line. And then I took it to my tailor's hem and I just ironed it to make sure that the seam would lay flat. And I really recommend that you get a tailor's hem because it's hard to iron a rounded thing like a cup on a regular flat iron board. So this really like helps with that a lot. And this is what the cups look like after I finished ironing them. And then I took them to the serger and I serged all around the edges for both sets. And then now it's time to attach the cups to the front panel. I stacked the cup on top of the front panel with the right sides facing, making sure that the seams lined up. And then I started pinning the 2 pieces together all around the edge. I repeated the same step with the other cup, and then I sewed along the seam allowance line for each cup, and it came out like this. I whipped out my yellow thread and I top stitched around the outer edge of the cups and also down the 2 center seam lines, and it came out like this. You can see that the top stitching on the front panel stands out way more than the top stitching on the back panel, and that's because I used 3 threads. Clearly 3 is better than 1. So to connect the front and the back panels together, I stacked them on top of each other with the right sides facing, and then I did a straight stitch along the seam allowance line. And this is how it came out. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my invisible zipper and I'm going to install it so that I can close up this side opening, and part of that installation is going to include shortening the zipper length and then also folding over the top edge to hem it and also the bottom edge to hem it all the way around the top. Now tell me that invisible zipper don't look good. Tell me that don't look good. It looks so good. So the next thing to do is to connect the shoulder panel to the body of the corset. And so I wrapped that shoulder piece from earlier around me, and then I pinned each end of the panel down onto the cups. And then I did a super small stitch to just tack each side of that panel in place like this. And now it's time to move on to what I like to call the front embellishments. And the front embellishments for me is basically just the belt anchor, and then the belt loops. So starting with the belt loop pattern pieces, I drew a light line down the center of the wrong side of the fabric, and then I folded each edge of the fabric into the middle, and then I folded it again in half, so basically a triple fold. And then I top stitched it down into place, and originally I wanted to do 2 columns of stitches, but then this happened. And so then I decided to just stick with 1 column of stitching. And this is how it turned out before I evenly divided the belt loop into 3 separate pieces. And we'll come back to those 3 pieces later. Let's move on to the belt piece. For the belt, I folded it in half taco style with right sides facing, and then I stitched along the top edge and the side edge on the seam allowance line. And it came out like this. After that, I used the straw method to turn the fabric right side out, and I made sure to darken the marks so that I'd know where to install the grommets. I'll be using this grommet kit. And I got this from Amazon. The link is in the description box. And it has different colors, but I think I want to go with the gold to really match. And this also has instructions on how to install the grommets, and it's pretty easy to follow. So I'm not gonna go into detail on how to install the grommet, but if you want me to make a separate tutorial on it, then I absolutely can. So just let me know. And this kit does come with the tools as well. And then I repeated these same steps with the other 2 belt pattern pieces. Now let's move on to the belt anchor. I'm not sure if that's the right name for it, but that's what I've been calling it. In case you're wondering what this mark is for, it's for the little stick thingy that's part of the metal buckle. I took the pattern and I folded it in half, taco style, with right sides facing, and then I stitched along the top edge and the side edge along the seam allowance line, and it came out like this, similar to the belt pattern, basically. I tried to flip it right side out without using the straw, and it was definitely a struggle. It turned out like this. And again, I darkened the mark for where the grommet would be installed. And then I whipped out my kit and installed the one lonely grommet, and then it turned out like this. After that, I took a metal belt piece, which I also got from Amazon. The link for that is in the description box. And I stuck the stick through the grommet hole, making sure that the stick was bending downwards. And then I pushed the fabric through the space and folded it under. I wiggled the fabric a little bit just to help it lay flat, and then I stitched about 3/4 of an inch away from the fold, and it came out like this. I repeated the same steps with the other 2 anchor pieces. So now that the belt and the anchor piece is ready, this is what we're working with. And with the other set stitch, this is also what we have. So boom, we're making waves, y'all, making waves. With my corset on, I eyeballed and experimented with where I wanted each piece to go, and I pinned it down. I made sure to fold down each end before pinning, since I would be doing a top stitch to keep it in place. And this is what it looked like with the 3 pieces folded and pinned in place. I used my 3-strand yellow thread with a 100/16 needle to do the top stitching, and it came out like this. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. I had to go back and redo my belt loop pieces because the first set of loops were just way too thick for my domestic singer sewing machine to get through. So I decided to make my belt loops the same way that I made the belt and the belt anchor pattern pieces, and then I divided it into 3 pieces. From the inspo pic, I can see that the belt loops are placed between the last 2 grommets of the belt. So I made a mark on the corset just above and below the belt anchor between the last 2 grommets. And when I open the belt, you can see the 2 marks. I'm going to put my loop just a little under this because we need seam allowance. To install the belt loop, I'm going to fold my belt anchor down. Then I'm going to take the loop, fold it at the bottom, then fold it over the belt, and then do a top stitch, and making sure that the bottom of the loop is in line with that mark that I made. And I also made sure that there was a little bit of room between the folded belt loop and the anchor piece so that the belt could easily slide through. I ended up having to hand stitch the belt loops because I didn't want to put my machine through the stress, and this is how the corset turned out. Okay, now keep me honest. If you think I did a good job, leave a comment, so good, exclamation point, below to let me know. And if you're looking for some ideas on what you can do with denim fabric, then you should check out this collection of denim upcycle ideas for your next sewing project. And until next time, a presto!